You are listening to Eastman's Flycast, an adventure fly fishing specific podcast covering travel, tactics, and next level insight. Now your host, Brian Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new Eastman's Flycast for you. So this week on the podcast, I have on a buddy of mine, Russ Corrone. Russ Corrone, I've had him on the hunting podcast. He comes from Colorado, extremely intelligent, just has a great approach to hunting and fly fishing. And part of the deal with this podcast is I try hard to not have it so region specific. You know, I live and fish a lot here in Montana, but I love to travel and fish other places. And I love having conversations with guys that fish other rivers. See what works in their rivers, you know, compare and contrast the different tactics, skill sets, the different flies, and that's exactly what we do on today's podcast. So Russ lives in Colorado. We talk about some of the rivers he loves to fish, some of his tactics, some of the great times of years to fish these rivers, and it's tough out there. There's a lot of fishing pressure nowadays. There's a lot of guys that are on these rivers trying to catch fish, and so you know there is a competitive side to things and a beat the pressure. And Russ beats it by fishing a lot of off season. But it's just a great podcast, great back and forth. Guys, I'm really enjoying doing this Eastman's Flycast, so I appreciate it. We're trying to build an audience. We're still young in this podcast. So make sure you subscribe. The ratings and reviews really help me out on iTunes, help push the podcast, and a follow on that IG page. I'm trying to put out the absolute best content I can, and also lay down the best podcasts I can. And so this is a good way to do it. Is I go back to some of my guests that have been on the hunting side of things, where we've had great conversations. We have a connection. They did well on the podcast. And I also know he's a heck of a fly fisherman. So we better get him on the fly fishing podcast, and that's exactly what we did today. So thanks a bunch to Russ Corrone for being on the podcast. Thanks a bunch for Eastmans for believing in this idea I came up with to do this fly fishing podcast and supporting it. They just give me free rein to make decisions and to put out good, valuable content to you guys. And so I really appreciate their support as well. Make sure to check out the other podcasts on the hunting side of things, Eastman's Elevated. This week we've got a great one with the guys from Mountain Archery Fest. It's a 3D archery shoot. And I do need to get out that solo fly fishing podcast. I will make time this week. Just been so busy with work. We're tearing off a roof and framing a new house, and then also trying to get in some fly fishing, obviously. Did hit a really good caddis hatch the other day. Got some really good dry fly fishing. Went and I actually ran way up the canyon with my fly rod. Got it all to myself. Bunch of caddis coming off and fish eating them. It was pretty fun. But I need to get some of this work taken care of and get back out there. So it's coming. Thanks a bunch, you guys, for the support. Let's get right into this podcast. So it's Russ Corrone from Colorado. I'm your host, Brian Barney. Eastman's Flycast. Here we go. So I've got a drift boat, like a little, it's a 16-foot low-side hide.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little Ferrari in these rivers around Montana. So this is so wild, starting this fly fishing podcast, you know. I realize that I haven't traveled enough and fished. Like I go, you know, back home out to the Olympic Peninsula every year. And, you know, I've been to the Salt and I've tried that. And I love these western rivers, but I'm not getting to these other states like I should and seeing what they have to offer. Or even for that matter, around my home state of Montana. I just have so many great rivers right around me that I get to know, and they all fish different under different conditions. And so I just I need to travel more. It makes me more aware of that. And so when I thought of this podcast, I instantly thought of getting you on, just because you're the same as me. You've fallen in love with bow hunting, and you've also fallen in love with fly fishing. It seems like you're constantly doing one or the other, working at one or the other. And so I just thought it'd be great to have you on and just talk about some of the Colorado fly fishing you have.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to talk about that. It was my first love was fishing, and then it turned into fly fishing, and then I got exposed to bow hunting everything changed from then on. That was the priority, but it's still like my number 2 passion in life. So yeah, it's pretty cool that you did this podcast. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, well, thanks a bunch. Yeah, it is. It's bow hunting seems to be the ultimate. Those moments that you create and the hard work you put into it. But fly fishing, it fits a certain niche as well, where there's an adventure aspect to it. There's getting out in nature, and I love the mountains, but I also just love the rivers. And so it fills. I'm not going to say it fills a big void, but it does for me. I can't imagine my life without fly fishing. As big a part as bow hunting and hunting those wild places is, like fly fishing means the same thing to me.
Yeah, me too. Especially now that we can't shed hunt in the spring here. It's a great opportunity to spend that time fishing till May 1st. So yeah, all winter and then through the spring, I'm just, that's what I spend my spare time doing. And then, as the seasons change, the priorities change. I haven't really done a whole lot of fall fishing in the last probably 6 or 8 years, but that's some amazing fishing as well that I'm missing out on. Just gotta, put your time in where you can and utilize the season.
Yeah, well, and it's fun to take advantage of everything when it's at its best, like when fly fishing when the salmon fly hatches on. It's fun to take advantage of bow hunting when the bucks are in velvet or bow hunting when the bucks are during the rut. But yeah, you're right. We really miss out on a lot of that fall fishing. Man, I need to just fit more days in, like just a day here or there. It's the nice thing about fly fishing is you can go with just an afternoon. And so I need to do better in those autumn days of at least getting out, a handful of times to enjoy that fall fishing because it is so good.
Yeah, that's probably on my to-do list too this year. I mean, it's really hard for me to not be hunting if I have a tag in my pocket, but it's a good way to break things up, like especially if you've been struggling on a like in-state tag that you've got for a month or something like that, just to take a day and press the reset button, catch some fish, and then get back after some bucks or bulls or whatever it is.
Yes, I'm with you. Well, you know how I operate. I'm always recording. Do you mind if we just get right into it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, yeah. Again, just thought of you for this podcast. Just you guys have so much great water, in all these western states. But you in Colorado, Russ, you've got some great fly fishing, and you're traveling all over fly fishing for those things. Like, where are you located in Colorado?
It's western Colorado in Palisade, which is like on the outskirts of Grand Junction.
Oh, gotcha. That's a beautiful area.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. We got the Grand Mesa National Forest with hundreds of lakes. It's about 10,500 feet. Just a big flat top mesa with a bunch of backcountry lakes, and that's a blast to fish in the summer and the fall. But the Colorado River is pretty close. I fish in Glenwood Springs in that lower Colorado stretch. That's probably like my home water. That's what I fish the most. And then there's the Gunnison, which is another amazing river. And then we've got the Blue closer to the middle of the state. Those are the main rivers that I fish around my house.
Okay. Yeah, Colorado has one of the prettiest settings for those rivers too. That Gunnison, I've always wanted to fish that thing as I've hunted around there quite a bit, and it's just a beautiful river. And then that big canyon in through there, where you got to drag your raft down to the bottom. That looks like an adventure in itself.
Yeah, I actually did that 2 falls ago. That was like the only time that I fished during hunting season over the last 6 years or so. But one of my buddies and a bunch of his friends and his son, we all packed rafts down on mules, went through the Black Canyon, or not the Black Canyon, sorry, the Gunnison Gorge, and we did like a 3-day trip. It was just unreal. The landscape's stunning, the canyon's stunning, the fishing's amazing. It was an amazing trip.
Huh. Yeah, those seem to be like, what's the flow of the Gunnison running through there?
Ooh, off the top of my head, I mean, I've only floated it once and I've fished it a few times, so I'd be lying if I guessed, but it's it's more dangerous when the water's not flowing
Yes.
super
Okay.
because it exposes some of those big boulders. And we actually did the last trip of the season. There's a service that will basically, I think it was like $100 a guy, and there were maybe 10 of us. But they packed our rafts down on mules, and then they shuttled us to the put-in, and we left our cars at the takeout. So yeah, it's really like pretty easy conditions when the water is a little bit higher, but when it's pretty low late in the season, like we went, it was a little bit hairy.
Oh man, yeah. Colorado, yeah, you guys got some whitewater there. There's no doubt about it. And I know what you mean. When those flows get lower, it exposes more rocks, and the lines aren't as big. And a lot of times you can't even make it through when the flows get low. So I like a little whitewater and a little adventure, but some of that stuff gets a little spooky.
Yeah, it's not my forte. Like I'm not well versed in oaring a raft, but the two guys, or actually the three guys that ran the trip are all river rats, and they were guides for like 20, 30 years, and they're all old farts now. But yeah, I had no concerns going with them. By myself would be a whole different story.
They were good on the sticks, huh?
Oh yeah, big time. They're
Yeah.
pros.
Well, I'm impressed too, like Colorado. Like I'm just learning about these other states and the opportunities and the rivers. But it looks like you guys have some good fish there. Like you've landed a bunch of good fish over the years out of Colorado, and it'll grow those giant browns and giant rainbows in those streams.
Yeah, it absolutely will. A buddy of mine that buys antlers, he fishes a stretch of the blue up by Silverthorne, and he catches like 10, 15-pound rainbows. He's a spin fisherman, but he does like one trip a year, and he's got this one stretch that he knows like the back of his hands. He's been doing it since he was like 5 or something like that, and it's got giant trout. I haven't gone. Hopefully this season I get to go with them. But yeah, there's some great fishing here, that's for sure.
Man, that sounds like a cool place. That those big aggressive fish. I also have a buddy that fishes spinning rods and things. He likes those aggressive takes. And yeah, he gets some good fish for sure. I'd like to think those same fish will eat a streamer.
Oh yeah. Um, Speaking of fishing out of state a little bit, I go to Eastern Oregon. Those Montana wild guys did a video of buck nasty browns on that river, but I go there every summer as like a pilgrimage with my dad, and there are monster browns that will chase mice. And I think in 2 days last summer, I caught 20 fish over 20 inches in 3 days. And I think 8 of them were over 24, and they were all on streamers. So yeah,
What?
it was insane. But I'd say that's the best streamer fishing I've had. We have some good streamer fishing here too in Colorado, but that river in Eastern Oregon, man, you got to check that one out.
Man, I would say, yeah, I just saw that video pop up the other day. I watched it. Those guys do a good job.
Yeah, they're fun. I've always really liked that. I went there probably, 2008. I was in college playing summer baseball in a collegiate league in Idaho. And then my dad paid for like a guided trip out on that river and surprised me, like flew out and took me out on that trip. And that was my first, I guess, major experience with Western fly fishing. I'm from New York. So I fell in love, and I had an amazing trip, caught a bunch of 20 inchers there, and um, been going back ever since. And then they made that video, and it kind of blew up a little bit, but it's still a pretty solid river.
Yeah, it's pressure and notoriety nowadays. It doesn't seem like there's many secrets left, but there are. Like every river fish is different, and it's just catching those rivers when they're fishing good too. Like hitting the conditions right, and then getting in where you fit in as far as other boats and other fishermen. Like finding a stretch you can get on. But like the pressure is such a major portion of it. Even here in Montana on these rivers, it's so much fun that there's a lot of guys chasing that same fun. And if you get a guy that's really good at catching a lot of fish in front of you, there's not going to be a lot left when you come down. And so, gosh, it's just a part of fishing, isn't it? The pressure.
It sure is. Yeah, I kind of like fish in the winter for that reason here because I literally see nobody. The days are pretty nasty. You know, it's in the 20s or guides are freezing over. But, you know, occasionally you'll get a 30-degree day or 35 and it's gorgeous and you got the whole river to yourself and you're not getting that pressure. So it just seems like big fish after big fish. And they're all consolidated into those kind of slow, deep stretches of the river. So, and then in the summer, I kind of transitioned to hiking in 3-4 miles to some of these lakes up on the mesa. Or I'll just, you know, throw streamers on the Roaring Fork or the Colorado. But yeah, that pressure, it's just like hunting. I mean, if you are contending with a bunch of good hunters in the same basin, you're going to have some problems. So yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. You just gotta pick in the right seasons in the right places is a big part of it. Like around here, there's nobody in the winter, in the spring. You have it all to yourself. You get a pretty cool experience. But the summer's a cool experience too, with the hatches and the bugs coming off and fish getting aggressive. And you said you like to go to the Roaring Fork, and then you mentioned another one and pitch streamers. This must be good big systems with big holes that hold big fish, huh?
Yeah, that Glenwood Springs in Colorado, that's where the lower Colorado River and the Roaring Fork converge. So yeah, you basically, if you flew into Glenwood Springs, you'd have access to fishing the Colorado, Roaring Fork. You could go up to the Frying Pan, which is not that far. It's like an hour from there, as well as the Blue River. So you've got 4 amazing rivers within about an hour. But yeah, I mostly fish that Roaring Fork and the Colorado River floating in the summer, swinging streamers.
Well, and how cool getting up to those lakes. There's so much great fishing in lakes, and those still water, that can grow giant fish in still water. And there's so many of those things to hike around to. It sounds like you've got a great spot to do that there in Colorado.
Yeah, the Mesa is amazing for that. I'd say the quality isn't as great as the quantity. There's so many fish. There's cutties and cutbows and some browns, rainbows. And brookies. There's nice variety, tons of fish, but I would say that the overall size isn't that huge. 15, 17 inches is a pretty good fish. I think my biggest is like a 24-inch cutthroat, but that was an oddball. So yeah, but some of these other lakes, these high country lakes that I've been finding slowly, it's not super easy to find them, but last summer I found one that I went to a bunch, and there's just football, tanker, rainbows, browns. There's even splake in this lake, but yeah, just fishing those chronomids and chironomids and leeches and things like that. It's a blast because they've got so much open water to fight, especially those bows. They'll go up, they go down, they go side to side. It's a nice change from a river where they just go laterally and go up and down too in these lakes.
Yeah, I do like fighting them in lakes like that. You're right. Okay, that makes good sense what you said. Like, because a lot of these high country lakes that I hike into, like we have golden trout you can go find and cutthroat and rainbows in places. But you're right, a lot of these high mountain lakes that I'm hiking into, they don't really hold the big ones. When I say big ones, like our lakes around here, even Ennis Lake is a great fishery. And some of the still water's just kind of forgotten because rivers are really fun to fish. But Quake Lake, throwing mouse patterns at night or looking for it for dry flies or salmon flies in the summertime can be really good. And then like Hebgen up above will just hold some giant fish. So that's what I meant by some of those lakes holding bigger fish. But that makes sense what you're talking about. A lot of those high mountain lakes. It's about stretching the legs, getting some exercise, and then action. It seems like those fish are always so hungry in those lakes.
For sure, yeah. I think the first trip that I ever went on the Mesa, we backpacked in, 2 guys that I work with backpacked in, and it's like a 3-mile hike to these 2 lakes that are almost connected, but right next to each other. And between the 3 of us, I think we caught like close to 400 fish that day. And that was my first experience in Colorado, and I was absolutely mind blown. And that was the day I caught that 24-inch cutthroat. But yeah, just fish after fish. We're throwing any fly that we could amuse ourselves with. I mean, the biggest, ugliest, stupidest flies we had in our box, everything caught fish.
Yeah, it's so fun, isn't it? I love those lakes. I like hiking my girls into those lakes. You were asking about them earlier, but summertime's great for an adventure where you go hike into those. Trout are always hungry. And like you were stating earlier, it seems like as you get dialed into it or you continue to learn, you start to find some lakes that do hold some big fish that you can hike into. You know, we've got some around here like the Oxalata Lakes will hold some giant fish up there, and they're just small little mountain lakes, a couple you can hike to and get back in there and have a chance at a real big fish. So it's just continuing to develop the knowledge of the still water around us, but then you start to find some pretty good lakes where you got a good chance at a big one.
Yeah, there's some lakes that even have restrictions on like catch and keep. So basically, you can't keep it if it's less than 18 inches or 16 inches, and those lakes tend to have bigger fish where I'm at. So that's like one of the starting points that I look for when I'm looking for, a reservoir or a lake that's got some bigger fish in it.
Oh,
And
that's a good trick.
Yeah, and then the next thing would be just distance from the road, because everything close to the roads on the mesa just gets pounded. But if you can get away from the crowds a little bit, it's pretty amazing.
Yep. And then what are you looking for in these lakes when you hike in? When you're looking to start fishing a lake, you had mentioned like leeches. I know those balanced leeches fish really good, and then chronomids. Like I like chronomids. Like I like to use as big a one as I can get, like a size 16 or so, and use a lot of black with gold ribbed and things. Like what are you using when you're going for lakes, and then where are you starting to fish these lakes from?
Yeah, so I use, there's one fly that's pretty widely used around here called the Black Carson. And I tie up some of those, but I like to put a little bit of my own spin on it just to make it look a little bit different from what other people are throwing. But yeah, I mean, big midges and chironomids and even like size 14, I've been tying them in. And I'll usually run like 2 flies, and I usually just do chironomids or just leeches. And sometimes just with a little bit of a breeze, you can just cast out and then just drift and then just give your leech a little bit of a twitch every now and then, and that will entice a good hungry trout. But sometimes I'll actually even do like a double rod where I have one fly rod in one hand, one in the other, and I'll kick with belly boat. And it's a rodeo if you get 2 at the same time, but you can cover like 2 different sections of the water column. And then if one rod is, and then different flies too. And then if one rod's producing better than others, you can, switch over to what that is. Like, let's say it's 10 feet deep with a sink tip, and that's catching more fish than just kind of like a floating line with, an unweighted streamer or leech, then I would just switch to that 10-foot depth. And I just prospect like that, and then once my legs get tired, I'll start casting a little bit more.
Man, so you like to pack in your raft to all these lakes you go to. So you don't fish them from shore. You like to get out on them.
Yeah, for sure. There's pretty dense timber around all these lakes, so casting's a little bit of a nightmare. And a belly boat's an amazing piece of equipment. Another thing that I've been using lately is I got a pack raft, and that thing's super light. It's a 2-person canoe kind of shape. It's an alpaca raft.
Okay.
But it weighs like 14 pounds with the oars, and it's self-bailing. So yeah, I'll pack that in my hunting frame, and I don't even need waders. I can just fish in shorts. So that's kind of my preferred method lately, but it's better if you have a buddy, because it's kind of hard you can't fish 2 rods and paddle in one of those. You have to use a belly boat for that.
Oh man, Yeah, that alpaca sounds like a sweet setup for those high mountain lakes, though.
Yeah, I actually got it after I floated the Gunnison in that one trip a couple falls ago, with the intention of doing some pack trips through there. But I don't think my skills are quite good enough yet. I should probably do a few more trips on some more modest rivers before I kind of dive in head first on that one. But yeah, it's a nice tool for those still water fisheries, but it's really light, so it blows around quite a bit. So you need an anchor or just to go when there's less wind.
That is the key with still water, isn't it? Is trying to get to it when there's not a whole lot of wind.
Yeah, the lake that I've been fishing lately, with those big footballs in it, it's amazing all morning till like 11 or 12 o'clock, and then the thermals switch, and man, does that wind kick up, and it just makes it nearly impossible to fish. So you really just have to get up at the butt crack of dawn, get your fishing in, and then have a nice lunch. Hopefully the wind calms down before dark, but it's worth it even just to fish for like 4, 5, 6 hours there.
Yeah, it sounds like you got a cool spot. Man, I've got one spot like in northwest Montana that I've hiked in and scouted for high country mule deer in there a bunch. Killed a nice buck in there. And man, a couple of those lakes that I've come across in there, some of those things humans don't even hike into that are just exploding with dry flies. So I think like this summer I need to take like a combo trip and take my fly rod back up there and see what's living in a lot of those lakes. They always they look so much fun to fish. Yeah, I can't believe I haven't brought my fly rod. Another place is like Nevada in the Rubies, which is iconic for hunting mule deer. Some of those high mountain lakes, man, I've seen some hammers swimming around in those things.
Yeah, that seems like a great opportunity to double dip a little bit. I think both of us, because we love hunting so much and fishing also, that if we can take advantage of those opportunities to do both in the same trip, that'd be ideal. So unfortunately, the place I like to hunt mule deer close to my house doesn't really have any river system, creeks, or lakes on it, but it's still not far away from where all the rivers, creeks, and lakes are. So I think I could probably do a better job double dipping too.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just those high mountain lakes take so much effort to get into, and a lot of times scouting around, you've already done a lot of the work or have a lot of your elevation. Look down in those things and see a bunch of trout popping. And two, like the good glassing times are morning and evening, which gives you most of the middle of the day where you could get some good fishing in.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yep. But I do like those river systems. I like floating in the summertime. I just think it's a fun way to go about it. And your Colorado ecosystems, they must be really healthy to produce those kind of trout. Like all through the west, all the way up north from where I am, Montana, all the way down through Colorado. It seems like there's just great ecosystems. So you guys got great aquatic bug life in the summertime, I'd imagine.
Yeah, we have a really nice variety of bugs here, but only a couple rivers around here get that salmon fly hatch, and the Gunnison in particular is pretty amazing when you can hit it right. It's like a 3 or 4 day stretch where it really peaks, but I've hit it 2 out of the last 3 years, and it's just amazing to see these big trout move 10 feet, just eat one bug.
Man, that is good on you hitting it the last couple of years. Yeah, it can be a finicky hatch, and there's a lot of people trying to hit that hatch too. So there's a lot of dry flies being thrown around, but there is nothing like it. Gosh, I just love those 3-inch bugs coming off, and like you say, those big fish get so aggressive to grab them off the surface, and so you get to see the whole take and eat and everything, and then have to try to keep your composure. And every hook set is different on that salmon fly too. Sometimes you're too quick, sometimes you're too late, and it just depends how that fish comes up and grabs it. You got to make that decision when to set the hook. But that is a fun hatch to fish. How cool on the Gunnison. That must be a fun place to fish it.
Yeah, you can actually, in 2 or 3 places, you can fish it without floating it. You can just hike in. And it's a couple of those places are kind of gnarly and cliffy to get down to the river, but one of them is pretty easy. But yeah, actually last summer I fished that spot in Eastern Oregon, and like I said, it was just streamer madness. So I went from that, and then 2 days later I hit the salmon fly hatch here, and I think I missed like the first 15 fish just because I was getting so jumpy and excited, and I had, just come from streamer fishing. So it definitely took me a little bit to adjust, but man, I mean, when it's prolific like that, it doesn't really matter if you miss 15 in a row because you're going to have another 30, 40 chances by the end of the day.
Man, that's fun fishing. Yeah, I really enjoy those dry fly hatches. And I enjoy those ones that bring out the biggest fish in the river too, and that one seems to. It just brings out those big fish. And usually it's at least around here when we're getting those hatches, it's higher water, and it pushes a lot of these fish, out of the bigger holes and into the bank line holes, cut banks and edge holes and edge runs. And then I like fishing it. You're talking about wade fishing. Like, I don't always have a buddy to go with in the evenings and things, or when I get free time. And so a lot of times these salmon fly hatch, I'm doing a lot of wade fishing. My river here, the Madison, is great for it, because the banks are a little bit more open, but I'm just hitting a lot of water. I'm not sitting and fishing one run for 20 casts. It's like, if that fish doesn't come up and eat in the first cast or two, he isn't going to eat. And so, like, I'll just walk up these banks, throw my cast, get my drift, my sweet one coming down the bank, maybe throw one further out, and then I just keep walking, and I'll even cast above as I'm walking to the next spot and then throw it in there and get it. Are you moving water like that in the Gunnison too, where you're just covering bank lines, sticking it in every fishy spot?
Oh yeah. I think I watched a video that I rented on Netflix like 10 or 15 years ago from Kelly Gallup, and he was talking about covering the water and kind of methodically and not really putting his fly in the same spot twice, just kind of gridding it out and covering the water. And ever since I saw him talk about that in that video, that really kind of resonated with me. And that's the approach that I use with nymphing, streamer fishing, dry fly fishing. It doesn't really matter what kind of fishing it is. I just, I cast close first, high stick, a little bit further out, take a step up, or down if I'm streamer fishing. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the way to fly fish most of these Western waters. Like, if they're there, they're going to take it. Maybe change up your fly, but if it's caught fish in the last 20 minutes, it's going to catch more fish.
Yeah, you bring up a good point of covering that water with whatever you're using, and they're kind of different tactics. But you're right, when you're nymphing, you run that close line by you right off your rod tip to start with, and then kind of start working your way out. And you cover that water. Once you run your flies through there, it's like move on to the next spot. And same thing with streamer. You swim that thing through there a few different times and a few different lines. If he hasn't eaten yet, he's not gonna eat, or maybe, like you say, change the color or something like that. But yeah, same thing with those dry flies. I'll go out in an evening and I'll walk 6-8 miles of riverbank. Usually 3-4 one way and then 3-4 on the way back. But the whole time I'm just casting, putting it in those little fishy spots. If he doesn't eat it, I'm on to the next one. I just, and sometimes winter fishing, it isn't that way, or if you're fishing a big hole where you'll sit there and work it for a while, it's different. But I'm with you. I just like to move and cover water. If he's going to eat it, he's going to eat it in the first few casts, or he's not going to.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. That's definitely my approach with fly fishing, and maybe it's because I'm impatient, but it seems to work pretty well too. So no complaints on that end.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You guys have a pretty good mix of rainbows and browns in those streams that you have over there?
Yeah, the Colorado's got, I'd say, pretty equal number of rainbows and browns. I may be lying to you, but just from what I've caught, it seems to be true. Yeah, the rainbows don't really get much over 20 inches. Occasionally they'll get one 22, 23, but some of those browns will get 25 or larger. I actually caught a sucker a few trips into last summer that was probably like 12, 14 inches. And just about to bring it into the boat, and this monster brown came up and grabbed it. And he was probably close to 30. I had him on the line for like 3 seconds, and then he let go. But there's some massive browns in both the Colorado and the Blue and the Roaring Fork as well.
Man, just to have the possibility at those big fish, you see them so rarely. And it's the same thing here in Montana, is that, you always have the chance at a 30-inch fish, at least in these bigger systems. And you always have the chance at a 24-inch or 25-inch brown. But you don't catch them that often. You get like a handful of them a season, and that's fishing 100 days or something. So they're so rare to see, but it's just nice to know that you have the chance. It's those great big fish like that, or knowing that they're in the system, or thinking that you might tie on to one of them, that keeps it exciting for me. I just love chasing those big ones like that.
Yeah, me too. I think I need to start doing a little bit more night trips. Big browns that are parsivorous, they eat large fish. They're going to eat at night, maybe once, maybe twice, big meals. So I need to start taking advantage of some more night trips. My buddy Yvonne just got a Raft. It's one of those, what is it called? Flycraft.
Okay, yeah.
And that lower Colorado River, kind of more by silt and down all the way to Debec, probably has less fish, but some bigger fish. And it's pretty easy rowing, easy water, pretty flat. So I think a night trip would be ideal on that stretch of the river.
Huh. So, yeah, we've got a little night fishing around here. I have to get in on more of that too, because a lot of those great big giant brown trout eat at night. Like, I hear about some of it, mouse patterns, and there's a lake here that guys are fishing at night. Our river might be a little too gnarly, but it's not like you couldn't walk into a great big hole. Fish, so they've got pretty good eyesight at night, right? I just don't have that much experience with it. I remember growing up in Washington, they used to fish for steelhead at night. They'd use like glow bugs and things that would glow and like light them up with their light. You think fish can see those big streamers at night like that?
I think I'm not the guy to ask, but just based on what I know, I think they use their lateral line, and they feel the water being moved or pushed by your fly, and that's why I think those mouse patterns work well, because they just kind of push a lot of water, and that kind of triggers the response to eat. But yeah, I'm not sure if they see it or not.
Huh. I got to do more of it too. I just got to go run a couple night missions when it's summertime, or even full moon when I can see. It might really surprise a guy what you tie into. There was just a film done not too long ago, and it was fishing at night. I think they were maybe on a lake or something, but they were catching a bunch of giant browns. I can't remember what it is now. That just reminded me of it when you said that.
Yeah, I think if you could find a stretch of river that's not too gnarly and a full moon night, that's the recipe for big browns. So I think that's both of our homework for this summer.
I think you're right. I think that is our homework. Yeah, I got to try that. I got to try some more of that out, because I think those big predatory fish are eaten. Huh. Yeah, that sounds like fun. See if we can get those things to eat at night. Yeah, I need to fish some of those mouse patterns at night would be fun. Like you say, that makes sense, like moving the water, and you move the water and they can feel it and sense it and go for it. Like they don't actually have to see it.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. I think they see it a little bit too, but I think really it's that water that's getting pushed. I actually tied a bunch for that river out in Oregon, and I got there. I told the guy at the campground what my plan was for that night. He's like, "Oh, you better not do that. It's illegal." So word of advice to anyone that's considering doing some night fly fishing, that they better check the regs for that state, because Oregon definitely does not allow it, unfortunately.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't know that. Huh. Yeah, you wouldn't want to be out there doing it when you're not supposed to, for sure. But yeah, I think a lot of those big browns eat at night, like you're saying. There's some big fish in my my local river right here, but it's just a high pressure river. There's a lot of guys on the Madison, and even in the off season right now, there's no guiding. It still looks like the 4th of July in some of our parking lots, with the quarantine and everything. But yeah, those bigger fish, they just get wise to it, and I think you're right. Those that I always do really good. I call it the evening drip or the evening drift. A lot of the guys get off the water at 5 and work in construction. I'll just be finishing my day at 5, and so I can have my drift boat loaded up and put in on a section, and I can float 4 or 5 hours with most of the boats off the water. But man, do those fish like to eat it in the evening like that. Those big fish will just slide over into those runs, and fish that haven't eaten all day, all of a sudden they start to eat in the evening. I just think that's such a great time to fish a river. And even if you were traveling to a different river, to hit it on some of those off hours. And I also do good. The evening has to be my favorite. But there's something about the morning and being the first boat on the water and the first bugs down through, like, even though the bugs may not be hatching yet, those fish are still hungry, and those first fish of the day seem to eat even if the hatches aren't going. So timing on these rivers can be huge.
Oh, for sure. And going back to that's a great point, Brian. And going back to the morning, sometimes like a lot of those fish move through the river every day. And you could fish a stretch in the evening and then fish it the next day, and there's different fish there. So yeah, I totally agree with you in that first look in the morning's a nice opportunity to fool some of those bigger fish.
Yeah, they do run, they do move. I think more than we know a lot of times. It's wild. The other day I went floating with my dad on Friday, and we did the float down to the lake, which is wade fishing only. So it's good fishing down through there. You can't fish from a boat. You got to stop and get out. So I took my dad down there. We were having a good day of fishing, but I had to do this phone call, and I had to do it at like 2 o'clock and get on this group meeting. And it was like, well, I'm not going to let this one meeting ruin the whole day. I'll just take it on the river, And so no big deal. Sitting there on the banks of the river, and I'm talking, and I don't even have my rod or anything. The boat's down, Dad's fishing or whatever. Dude, and I saw this. It was like a 22-inch brown that slid up right under my feet and went sliding right up the bank line there, that I never would have seen unless I was just sitting there for a half an hour. But he swam so close to the bank line, you couldn't even got a drift to this fish where he was swimming up, and swam right up, and I kind of followed him into the hole and out of it, just like moving up the river middle of the day. Wild to see him readjust or move like that. Like they're not a traveling fish like a steelhead or something, but man, oh man, that brown trout was sure moving holes.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes you a good fisherman, Brian, is that, you take the time to notice these things, and it's all about time on the water and your experiences, and seeing things like that kind of adds it up, and it starts making sense once you see it. But until then, it's just kind of taking someone's word for it. On the other hand, I think some tailwaters like the frying pan, I think a lot of those fish just pot up in one spot and they don't really move very much. Maybe move 100 yards up and down the river, but like I'll see some, let's say like a 25-inch rainbow in the frying pan. I'll see it in the evening in one spot, and then it'll be like 50 yards away in the morning. And that the fish are really visible, and that river runs gin clear, and it gets hammered by people. So those fish are super picky. They don't eat anything with bead heads, and it's got to be a perfect presentation. You have to sneak up on them. But yeah, there's some toads in there. They just don't move. But I think on more of like a freestone type river, they'll slide up and down the river a lot further than they do in those tailwaters.
Huh. So they won't eat a bead. They don't like a bead head.
Not in the upper frying pan. I'd say a little bit more so in the lower. I think the middle and the lower frying pan's the best part of that river, but
Okay.
there's just so much pressure up top. It's a zoo. It's like steelhead fishing back on the East Coast on those Great Lake tributaries, or probably even in some spots on the West Coast too. There's less people there, but it's just shoulder to shoulder, and you get your drift, and then you just roll, drift, roll, and you stand in the same spot for like 40 minutes. That's not really what I'm into in terms of fly fishing, so I don't really go there very often anymore. But that middle and lower stretch is pretty solid.
Huh. Um, yeah, those fish get picky. Do you notice them getting picky with leader size? How much do you mess with your tippet fishing these different places, still waters and lakes?
Uh, on tailwaters, I'll go like 6X. Um, I don't like 7X at all. It's, I don't know. I break off more fish on 6X than it's worth. So I think 7X than it's worth. So I think 6 is plenty for tailwaters, and I can catch a 25-inch trout on 6X pretty handily. So I'm not too worried about that. But on some of those freestone rivers, like on the Colorado and the Roaring Fork, I'll go 4X most of the time, and 4X or 5X on those still waters, but longer leaders. Like 9 foot is the shortest I'd ever think of going on those lakes, and I would go more like 15 feet.
Wow. Okay. Um, Man, I need to remember that as I fish different streams and things. I get spoiled fishing here in Montana. I fish all speedometer cable to my flies. Like I do, it's like you nick one little piece of your line and then you lose that fly that you had, or lose that fish you had on. And so, like when I first started, I was really into, the smaller tippets and trying to use them. And just the more and more I'd size up, I just wouldn't notice a difference between fishing. So, like I fish pretty much like 2x, 3x to my nymphs and around in these streams in here. Yeah, my streamers, I'm fishing 0x, 1x. My salmon flies, I'm fishing 0x. I'll fish 12, 15-pound tests to my salmon flies.
Wow.
They just don't care. They just come up and eat it, it seems like. But I've heard that about Colorado, that they're finicky there. And we have a ton of pressure here. I would think they'd be finicky here. And definitely like where I notice the tippets where I really have to go and use like the 4X and the 5X, little spring creeks, or if I hike stuff into the park, gin clear, smaller streams. Okay, I can notice those fish rejecting my flies and I'll go smaller with my tippet. But yeah, I'm spoiled around here. I use big tippet. I don't lose many flies, and the fish just still seem to eat them just the same. I don't know if
Man.
it's like a lot of the current, or I'm not sure what's different. Maybe just a little bit more color in our rivers, or I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, that could be it. What's interesting is that river I fish in Oregon is kind of like this green stained water, and so is the Gunnison. The Gunnison here, you can fish 3 or 4X no problem, especially with those salmon flies. But out in Oregon, if you fish anything thicker than 5X, you're going to get a lot of fish turning their noses at flies. So I basically view it as you've got 1 or 2 presentations to a trout. What's your best chance of making that fish eat 6X or 4X? I go with 6X. In that situation. But man, that'd be really nice to just be able to use 2 and 3X all the time. I would not worry about landing fish, and you could muscle them more. It'd be pretty fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I need to be cognizant of that as I travel around and fish different rivers, that I do get spoiled. A lot of times it could be, I'm not catching fish, not because of my flies or my presentation, but just my leader size because I fish that speedometer cable. So yeah, I can
Yeah.
see where that could come back to bite me, and something I need to be cognizant of. Like I like to make, all my own leaders and things, and trout don't seem to have a problem with them, but I do need to remember that in summertime, and when I go to some of these smaller systems, is to not fish such heavy cable on them.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's I guess a bonus that our fish are a little bit pickier maybe here, because then I can go to a different state and be comfortable fishing 5 or 6X. But yeah, I'm definitely a little bit jealous in that sense. Um, I will say that I only use fluoro too. I don't use mono for nymphing, just to get that fly down a little bit faster. It cuts through the water better than mono. Mono just takes a little bit longer to get in the zone. So, yeah, fluoro 5, 6X for out here is kind of the name of the game.
That's what I've heard. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I fished that a lot and busted off a bunch of flies and a bunch of fish, and I just kept sizing up and it kept working. But I do need to really remember that when I go to smaller stretches or different streams, or like you're talking in Eastern Oregon. Man, oh man, I could be just beating my head against the wall. So yeah, I better stock up on my small tippet.
Yeah, and now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably because that river sees more, or fish in that river see more flies than fish on the Gunnison. Like, the Gunnison's a pretty remote river, and yeah, a bunch of people will drift through per day, maybe like 6 boats, but and then like at the easy access sites, maybe you get 20 fishermen, but in between those stretches, those fish don't see a lot of flies, so that probably has a lot to do with why you can get away with something like 3x on that river with the same color water as a tailwater in Oregon that sees more fishermen.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, it's fun. Just coming into the spring season now, so there'll be some good fishing from now through summer. I know you'll be looking forward to hunting season. Have you drawn any good tags yet?
No, I basically put in for Colorado, uh, elk, deer, sheep, moose. Um, I'll buy a point for Montana. I'll buy a point for Wyoming again. Um, and then I was going to do an Idaho black bear hunt, but I didn't get my tag in time. They said that anyone, I guess, that bought their tag before April 4th could still go and hunt in Idaho with everything that's going on right now. But if you didn't buy it, you can't go. Maybe they'll lift that sanction, and hopefully they do. But as of right now, I'm not going to be bear hunting in Idaho this year. So I probably won't go deer or elk hunting there either as a result, unfortunately.
Yeah, man, that's too bad. Yeah, it's wild times, just unprecedented. We don't, it's just changing by the day it seems. And yeah, I did hear that in Idaho. I think Montana shut down their season until the 24th. Now, they might let that up after the 24th, and you may have an opportunity to come to Montana, but Idaho offers those $40 tags, which is pretty nice for bears. So, yeah, they definitely got some good bear hunting. But, yeah, man, I mean, nothing we can do, right? Just keep weathering the storm and getting out as we can. They haven't shut down fishing yet, which is good.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing, and I don't see them being able to do that. So I think we got that going for us.
Oh, it's so nice. Yeah, well, we can just, yes, as outdoorsmen can keep our sanity during this time, be good leaders for our family, but a lot of that is getting out to the mountains and to the rivers and having a good time. I mean, nobody's having fun if they're locked in their house the whole time.
Heck no. Tomorrow, my school doesn't have work on Friday, but tomorrow my buddy and I are gonna go fish this one inlet to a lake that's just thawing now, and it's just loaded with fish. But we'll fish that, and then I'll probably try to shoot a turkey in the evening. So that'll be an awesome spring day out here in western Colorado.
Oh, good for you. Yeah, enjoy it. Soak in some sunshine. Yeah, that's a good way to spend the day. Yeah, we just opened bear season here, and then yeah, I've got to pour like a little concrete tomorrow in the afternoon to get it done. But I'm thinking after that, I'm probably gonna get out. I got this stream that turns on. It was like a light switch as far as temperature. Like Saturday, they were eating streamers and aggressive and chasing out of holes, and it was good fishing. And I had one chase me that was like a good 24-inch fish that chased me twice and never ate it. And I did end up landing a good one that day, but then I went the next day and I thought, oh man, the chase was so good, they're going to be on it again. And the water just got colder that night, and then it didn't warm up as much the next day, and I couldn't get a chase, couldn't get an eat off any color. Ended up catching a couple off nymphs or whatever. But I'm thinking Friday the temperature's finally going to be warm enough, and there hasn't been anybody on it, so I'm going to go toss a streamer in there and see if I can't go catch that big one that came after me last
Nice. Sounds
weekend.
like yeah. Sometimes those big ones, they find the best spot in the river that's got the least amount of work for the most amount of food and good cover, and they just stick there. So yeah, hopefully you get a shot at them.
Yeah, so that'll be fun, and then yeah, start looking for a bear this weekend and getting a little fishing. But it'll be fun to start enjoying outside. Montana is always so late to loosen her grips on winter, and I know you guys live in the mountains too. You're probably dealing with a lot of the same thing, but it'll just be nice to have some 50-degree days and some sunshine.
Yeah, I think my wife and I would both like to move to Montana, but unfortunately it's a little too cold for us. We're chickens with that. And the town that we live in is like this kind of like high desert little oasis at the base of the mesa. So we get much warmer temps than a lot of cities in Colorado. It's like, I think 60 degrees today. But where I work is about a half hour away, and it's probably 48, 50 degrees there today. So it's a nice little like, geothermal hotspot in western Colorado. And it's nice for us. We like the warm weather.
Yeah, you guys got a nice little oasis there. Yeah, that heat and sunshine is always nice. For sure. Yeah, Montana's a great place to live, but our winters are long. It kind of comes and goes and ebbs and flows, and it's kind of like how you were describing your wintertime fishing. But it does hang on in the springtime, that's for sure. So yeah, it sounds nice where you're at. We'll get out this weekend, go enjoy some fishing. Man, thanks a bunch, Russ, for coming on. I sure appreciate it. We had such a great conversation on the Hunting Podcast, which I have to get you back on. You're just absolutely as thrilled about bow hunting as I am, or as excited about it. And same thing, fly fishing. It was just great to hear your insight. I think we got talking fly fishing on our hunting podcast and vice versa, but we just have we're cut from the same cloth. We like the same things. So it was just a pleasure to talk to you, man.
Yeah, I mean, they're so interwoven, and it's hard to not love both of them. So thanks, Brian, for having me, and it's great talking to you as well.
Okay. Yep. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right, guys. That's a wrap. Thanks again to Russ Corrone for coming on the podcast, having an in-depth conversation. Really like that guy. I got to get together with him and do a fishing day or do a hunt with him or something of that nature. We're just both cut from the same cloth. So I really enjoyed the conversation. I really enjoy bringing this podcast to you guys. So help me promote this podcast. If you like this content, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. I know it sounds cliche, but it really helps me out. And the truth is that, without building an audience, I can't make this podcast go. So if you guys enjoy the content, make sure to share it with your buddies, share it with your friends, share it on social media. It really helps me out, and I really appreciate it. I want to make this thing go, and I've got one chance at this fishing podcast. So I've got to. It's got to start getting out there if we want it to succeed. So I'm going to continue to work my very hardest at it. Share my passion of fishing. I think I already have in about 50 days this year, if not more. I've just been crazy about fishing, chasing big brown trout, chasing them with the streamer. I just had absolutely awesome fishing. So yeah, I can't wait to share my journey, getting into some good dry fly hatches, going to hit it hard all summer long, traveling to different rivers, walking the walk and talking the talk, and have done so for many years, but I just really want to make this thing go. I enjoy doing it. So help me where you can, guys. And thank you for listening in the sport. This is the end of the podcast. This makes sure this tells me that you made it to the end. Thank you. I appreciate it. So got some good ones coming up. We'll continue to get this podcast off the ground. If you guys are interested in the hunting podcast, Eastmans Elevated, I've got a good one coming out this week from the guys over at Mountain Archery Fest, and some great ones for the future. So I'm going to get back to it. I got to make it out to the job site here today, but hoping to fish some evenings this week and then this weekend as well. I'm kind of mixing and matching bear hunting right now with fly fishing. It's tough when you have so many hobbies you like. It's a tough life. So keep out there, guys. Thanks again for all the support. I'll check in with you guys next week.